Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my students. Welcome to another flipped video. This is for chapter 4.3. There's no A or B, just chapter 4.3, all done in one lovely flipped video. Today we're going to be talking about Washington Territory becoming Washington State. So buckle up and get ready for some fun. Before we can continue and actually talk about Washington State on their road to becoming Washington State, we have to talk about how does a territory actually turn into a state. First off, they have to have a population of at least 60,000 people. In fact, Washington State reached this goal in 1878. So if they became a territory in 1873, you do the math to figure out how long it took them to reach this population goal. Next, the territorial legislature, or the government of the territory, had to create a state constitution. The state constitution had to uphold the basic civil rights that were put forth in the Bill of Rights for the federal constitution. Also, the territory had to establish some kind of public school system. Once these three items were complete, then a territory could apply for statehood. Just like little Billy is, aren't you, little Billy? Now, let's actually talk about Washington State and its road to statehood. As mentioned before, in 1878, the population was over 60,000 people. In fact, in 1880, they had a population of 75,116 people. That's a lot. They had their constitutional convention in Walla Walla, which at the time was the biggest territory in Washington Territory because of the gold rush over in Idaho. During this constitutional convention, they talked about a lot of different items. One, they talked about women's suffrage, meaning allowing women the right to vote. They talked about abolishing reservations for natives. They also talked about having segregated schools between people who are white and people who are not white, mainly people of African descent. However, these three items were shot down and were not put in the Constitution. They took their Constitution to the people living in the territory. 6,462 people said, yes, we like this. 3,231 people said, no, we don't. Well, the majority of people wanted it, so they took it to Congress, and Congress said, no. You can only imagine how upset the people of Washington Territory were. Historians and people looking back feel that the main reason Washington Territory did not become a state was because the Democrats, who controlled Congress at the time, felt that if they let Washington into the Union, then their arch rival, the Republicans, would control and have more power in the government. When it comes down to it, it seems like it's always about who has the most power, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, not necessarily about what's best for the people. That's just Mr. Volkman's 2 cents. Well, we now have to go the road to Washington statehood part 2. They tried for 11 years to continually get into the Union. Finally, in 1889, the Enabling Act allowed Washington to become a state to enter the Union. Also coming in with Washington was North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. Now, during this second constitutional convention, they discussed a lot of things. Once again, they discussed women's suffrage, again allowing women to vote. They also discussed prohibition, which was making it illegal to make and sell alcohol. Now, women's suffrage and prohibition was left off Washington's Constitution, mainly for the big reason that people felt that women might push for prohibition, and men didn't want that. This quote here is from someone who was actually at the convention, and this gentleman said, "Women are natural mugwumps, meaning reformers and objectors, and I hate mugwumps." Now, most lawyers knew that women should be allowed the right to vote. However, again, government dictates who wants power, and they knew they would not get power if prohibition was pushed. Now, the people who wanted prohibition for the Washington Constitution versus those who didn't was staggering, as was the people who wanted to allow women to vote. As you can see, the numbers are pretty much equal. Now, let's talk about the Washington Constitution. Washington's Constitution was created by high social standing lawyers, bankers, businessmen, and wealthy farmers. Of course, all these people were men as well. Something else that was put into the Washington Constitution was the ability for the governor to veto either a whole bill or sections of it. And they did this because they were afraid that different special interest groups would have the opportunity to influence what people in the government wanted to do. Special interest groups, for example, would be people whose focus may just be on saving the trees or on stopping oil to be drilled in certain places. It could be also people who want to push ideas about lack of gun control or more gun control. Now, continuing on with the Washington Constitution, our Constitution actually adds or clarifies onto the federal Constitution. Here are some examples. Article 1, Section 7 talks about the right to privacy for all people living in Washington state. Right to privacy is not in the federal Constitution or Bill of Rights. Article 9 states, and I quote, "It is the paramount duty of the state to make ample provisions for the education of all children." The difference in our Constitution to the federal Constitution is that in Washington state, our Constitution actually kind of explains the right to bear arms in that we have a right to defend ourselves or to defend our state. The Declaration of Rights for Washington state has 35 sections. I'd like to take you to a copy of it. This is on the Washington State Legislature page. Here's Article 1, and I'm going to start scrolling down. There's a lot. You should try reading it. I mean, these are your rights and all. It's kind of important to know what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. It contains 70 pages, 31 articles, 98 amendments. That means changes from the original. Finally, Article 6 states that native land is under full federal authority. Well, thank you for watching this shorter flip videos. I'm sure you're happy for the shorterness, if that's a word. On Edmodo will be questions that I'd like you to answer to prepare for class. Thank you.